time to Mary Ann, who has had an incredibly successful career in the financial industry before she decided to act on her really what was a lifelong desire to specialize in serving families with children with special needs. And the source of that came from her own sister, Marcia, who had cerebral palsy, and she grew up watching her parents really struggle and be fearful of doing anything that might jeopardize Marcia's rights and benefits. And so Marcia was really, and her parents were her very first client. And over 17 years later, here she is making it her profession. And she has kindly been a professional advisor to rettsyndrome.org for years now and has presented at our conferences. And I think really just from her heart and from her skilled background is going to deliver an incredible presentation today. And I'm so glad that everyone has joined, and I really hope that you take her advice to heart and act on some of her recommendations. So with that introduction, Megan is going to turn the screen over to Mary Ann. And once we have her slides up, she can go ahead and get started. And reminder, go ahead and submit any questions that you have in the chat box or in the question box. I already see quite a few questions have come in, and we appreciate those. All right, so Mary Ann, we can see your slides. If you'd like to go ahead, we'd appreciate you to get started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone, and I'm hoping everyone can see the slides okay. So we'll get started. So what a great introduction, and I'm just thrilled all the time to be able to share my story with families, and if I can help you think about planning for your daughter, that's my purpose, is to really help families think about the things they need to do. So as it was shared, I do this because of my sister. You'll see her picture there. And I grew up in a world of not understanding. And I'm going to speak, sometimes I'm going to be talking as a sister. Sometimes I also have a son with a disability now. So I am a mom, and I'm also a daughter of two parents who became disabled as they aged. So I've been a caregiver in many different capacities. And in the last, now it's almost 25 years of doing some capacity of this, worked with tens of thousands of families, listening to stories in all different areas. But I didn't really understand in the beginning as a child that my parents faced a different kind of life than I had, and I didn't realize my life was any different. So growing up, it was just, I was a sister. And I talk from that perspective because as you look at your daughter, and you look at the other siblings you may have, I try to help you sometimes understand how we feel as a sibling. And as growing up, I didn't realize my life was different or my sister's life was different until perhaps her first day of school. And there were 6 children in our family. My sister is a twin, and the process of being a sibling was no different than my relationship with her, or my sister Arlene, or my sister Debbie, or with my brothers. But I was the oldest girl in the house, so I had certain responsibilities at a very young age. I can remember when I was 10, she was 6, going to her first day of school, and that was my first aha to say, "Wow, this is different. This is not the school I went to, and it's going to be different." And so I became pretty young at the age of 10, realizing that I was going to have some responsibilities to making sure my little sister was okay. And you may see that in your family as well. But then as time went on, I still was her sister. But growing up, as we would go places together, I realized that families and other people would start staring at my sister. And I became her protector at that point. If anybody didn't accept her the way I thought they should, I would battle for her. I would do what's necessary to call them out, and she would turn around and look at me and, put her hand up in the air and let me know that she knew that I was her protector. As time went on, I started to realize that she wanted, in her own view of the world, she wanted to have everything else I wanted. She wanted to have fun. She wanted to be responsible. I mean, there were things that she could do and she couldn't do. As an adult, as she grew up, she was probably developmentally about age 8. but she was a very she was able to communicate, so she was able to tell me what she wanted. And as she got older, she was still at home with my parents. um, there were days I took her everywhere with me, and when she turned 21, I was the one who took her out and had a party and got her drunk. And my parents were really upset with me, as you can imagine. I was 25, she was 21, and my mother didn't talk to me for about 2 months after that. She was really angry with me that I had, served my sister wine. But Marcia, after that, every time she wanted to introduce me to somebody, she would look at me and she would look at them and say, put her arm around me and say, "This is my sister. She got me drunk. We got drunk together when I was 21." And that was something for me that I started to understand, that even though it was a horrible experience, and yes, she did have a hangover, and it wasn't a very good thing to do, wasn't wise on my part. I was 25 years old. But yet she wanted the experience of the bad as well as the good. And I started to understand that about her and realize that as much as I could give her independence and whatever it meant for her, that was my mission. And so as time went on, I really started to push my parents to find her independence, help her. She did end up living in a residential facility, in a group home, and she did really well. At the things that she could do, she did. And she did much more away from my parents because she had to. And so that's basically the learning that I had, is that she was really able to, whatever at her level, and I see this across the board, every disability is different, every person is different, but our job as family members is to protect and to encourage and to help our family member have the best life they possibly can. Now, my other experience was when my sister did live residentially. One day I got a phone call. It was a Saturday morning, and my phone rang, and it was my dad, and the only words he had to say was that my sister was gone. She'd had a seizure the night before, and she couldn't turn over, and she suffocated in her sleep. So those of you who don't know my story, that was my life-changing day, because I had devoted my time up to that. She was 39 years old at the time. And I had devoted my life up to that point as to making sure she was okay, becoming her guardian, and doing all the things I needed to do to make sure that she could still participate in Special Olympics, and as my parents aged, be able to step in and be her caregiver. Even though she was living residentially, making sure I got there and made sure her care was good, and do all the things I needed to do. I was devastated. My purpose, and I've learned a lot about parents' purpose, is to make sure that she had a full life. And all of a sudden, when she passed away, my parents' purpose seemed to end, and my purpose seemed to end, and we really didn't know what way to go. And I was already at that point starting going out and working with families and making speeches. And a really wise man pulled me aside one day at a meeting I was at, and he said, "You look so sad, and you need to go forward. You need to move forward. All you've talked about is how she has changed your life and how much you've learned, and so stop it. Get off this sad phase and start to think about what you're going to do with all the things she taught." And I'll tell you, one of the key things I learned from her is how to listen, because one of her unique abilities was she could hear. She couldn't dress herself and feed herself, and she couldn't do a lot of the things that a lot of us do, but she had this unique hearing capability. And I could be in another room, be whispering to my mother about something, and she would hear me. And so I learned over time that she communicated to me what she wanted. She communicated clearly to me about what she wanted her life to look like, and I started to listen really carefully based upon that. And so my skill now is to be able to listen to people and hear what they want for their family member and try to make it happen, and it's one of our goals. So my mission is the same as your life mission, is to make sure that your daughter has a safe and fulfilling life. Sounds pretty simple, but as we all know, it's not that simple. So out of that came Protected Tomorrows, and I'm just going to share with you really quickly about some of the things we try to focus on, then we'll talk about what we're going to specifically focus on today. So we are now forming a network of advocates around the country. Typically, they're family members who want to help other family members, and we train them and help them use some of the things that we're doing today. We're going to go through an 8-step process today, and we're going to talk about each of these different steps and what you need to be thinking about as you're preparing a care plan for your child. And it starts with number one, and we're going to talk about how do you do that. And I'm going to ask you, if you have a piece of paper around, if you haven't printed out the worksheets, to think a few minutes about what we're trying to do here. And I'm going to have you take a minute and write those things down. But we're going to talk about creating a plan, the legal things you need to do, government benefits, and how to make sure that what needs to get done for government benefits is done. How do you make sure that you're communicating to everyone else what needs to be done? How do you think about where to live, learn, work, and play? How much money is needed? And then how do you keep looking at this on a regular basis? We also have done some really fun things in this past year. We've created a pooled trust so that those who can't afford an attorney could actually piggyback on our pooled trust. And that was a focus we've always had, and so now we finally have some of those things in place. There's a website. There's lots of information on our website. So sometimes if you're not sure about something, you could go there. I know that Rett Syndrome has their blog, and you can ask questions, and I'm always happy to answer those blog questions too. And we have a family membership system where some of the things I'm talking about and some of the tools, you can get access to that as well. Finally, I personally want to start to make some change through our think tank, and so we're starting to think about, we know that residential supports and programs are really tough to find, tough to get in place. So we're really having an initiative right now. I'm spending a lot of my time on how do we help the whole housing arena explode and get some exponential growth in that area. We're working with companies trying to identify what kind of jobs can be created so that people with disabilities can work. And then we, through our charity, have created a couple of things. The most exciting last one is called Tales for Life, and it's a 501c3 that we incubated. It now has its own 501c3 where we train puppies to be companion dogs and then can give them away to children with disabilities. So that's our latest initiative. So let's get started on your planning. We're going to go through a lot of things today. So what I want you to do, my goal, is to give you an awareness, because you're not going to be able to get it all done today, but to give you an awareness of the things you need to be doing. And I'm going to ask you, when we're done, to really take a step of committing today to the first step that you agree that you're going to do. So let's start with step one. And if you have the worksheets printed out, there's a worksheet that you can use to be filling out. If you haven't done that already, you can do it after the session. But step one is, I call it take a candid look. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to talk to you about this kind of like a business. So we're creating a business around your daughter. And what we need to do is to say, what do we want to happen for the future? And your child could be 2, they could be 22, they could be 42, they could be 18, they could be 2. I don't know what the age of everybody's child is. But I do know that from now going forward, you want them to be safe, and you want them to be to have the best life they can possibly have. And we need to make sure that all the things are in place to make sure that happens, not only while you're here, but if something were to happen to you, to make sure that they're okay going forward as well. But whenever I start to think about anything I'm going to do, I always think about 2 things. And so if you have a piece of paper, I would like you to write down 2 things for me. What is the best thing that could happen for your child? And then number 2, what's your biggest fear for their future? So I'm going to take a little pause here for a minute so you can all take a piece of paper out and have your pencil and write down you just write down a sentence, 1 sentence, and have it, and it could be a bunch of phrases as well. What is the best thing that could happen for your child's future? Besides a cure, which we all know that would be the best thing, but over and above that, what is the best thing that you want to put in place for your child's future? And then secondly, the next sentence is, what is your biggest fear? So I'm just going to take 30 seconds here and have a pause to give you time to do that. I wish I had some music. We could be going, da-dee-dee-dee-dee. But go ahead and do that. And just think about what's the best thing that could happen. I'm not gone. I'm just giving you some time. And then secondly, what's your biggest fear? And it can be 1 word, it can be 10 words, it can be a sentence. What's your biggest fear for your child's future? Okay, so I kind of know what you've written, or at least I know some of the words you probably used. So if we were all able to jump in and talk about it, um, let's talk about what just some of the things you may have written. And in the meantime, if you want to, I think you're able to write in some questions here. If you want to type in your words, go free to do it. I'll just look at those. So the first question I asked is what's the best thing that could happen? I'm going to, because I've been doing this for a long time, I'm going to tell you the words that I typically hear. If anybody hears something that I missed, or if you have a word that you want to add, I think you can type it in the message section. So happy is a word that I hear a lot. That people want their child to be happy. They want happiness in their lives. They want safety. They want a safe place for them to live. They want them to be able to get into school and have an education and learn whatever at a level of capacity, learn. They want learning to happen. They want recreation. So a place to live, a place to learn, a place to work if they can work, and a place to play. And they want that, but they also want it to be their child to be financially secure so that they have the money to make sure that all happens. They want friends. They want family still around, but the biggest two things I hear are happy and safe. And then let's talk about what about the fears. And so the main phrase we hear a lot is the biggest fear is what will happen to my child when I'm gone, but that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about what are the things you need to do so that at least you alleviate some of those fears. But the biggest fears are abuse, lack of friends, running out of money. So all the things that we talked about that we want, the fears tend to revolve around the fear that those things we want won't happen. But I will say that abuse and loneliness are probably the two biggest ones I hear. Maybe perhaps not knowing who the guardian will be in the future for someone stepping into your shoes. So if that's the case, if we want our child to be happy, let's talk about how do we start to create a plan around those two goals. Now, how do we start? How do we start thinking about it? So let's talk about things that are critical for you to do to even start thinking about how do you create a plan about your child. So I'm going to talk about first, when you get on an airplane and you're sitting with a child, the first thing they tell you is if the oxygen mask comes down, whose do you put on first? And you don't put the child's on first. You put yours on because you need to be available and you need to be competent and you need to have the wherewithal to be able to do what you need to do for your child. And so that's exactly what we need to do as parents or siblings or where we are when we have a child with a disability is we need to make sure we're okay. And many families will say to me sometimes, okay, how much money then do we need to set aside to make sure a child's going to be okay? And that dollar amount, I've been doing this for a really long time. I used to say it's as much as you possibly can save. Now, as we go through this process today, I'm going to tell you some things you could do to really understand that. But if you, in your will, said, I am going to leave every single penny I have for my child's future because that's what I want to have happen. If you said that, but you didn't take care of you, and in your will, when you pass away, there's nothing left, 100% of nothing is still nothing, okay? So the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure you're okay. You need to make sure you have enough because when you're retiring, you're not retiring for two. If you're mom and a dad and a child, you're not, and you say you have 3 other children, so it's mom and dad and 4 children, you're going to assume the other 3, you get them on their feet. You need to get them on their feet. You need to get them through school. You need to get them through all the things you need to do. So you need to make sure they're okay, and then you need to make sure you're okay. Because when you retire, typically you're retiring for 2. In this case, you're retiring for 3. I have a woman who's a single mom, and she has 5 children with a disability. She's retiring for 6. So when you're working, if you're doing your own financial planning or somebody's doing it for you, you have to make sure that you have a line item that says, what's it going to cost while I'm alive to provide for my daughter? And then you have another line item that says, when I'm gone, then how much do I have to provide? But you can't ignore that you're going to have this expense, however it's related to you during your lifetime. Now, the other thing I hear families say to me is, because I'm talking to them about planning for their child, and they say, I don't know how to think about that. I can't think about it. I can't wrap my arms around my daughter being around without me. I can't go there. Well, you know what? We have to go there. We have to be able to think about it. But I'm going to give you a way to think about it. Okay? What we're doing in this planning process is we are thinking about the quote-unquote future planning or retirement planning for your child. So if you came to me personally and said, Miriam, would you help us with our retirement plan? And forget your daughter. Forget you have a child with a disability. Forget that you have other children. If you were just a couple that said, help us with our financial planning for the future, I would start to ask you how you live today. I would say, tell me what your life is like. What do you do? Do you go out? Do you have student loans still? Are your bills paid off? Do you have a mortgage? I'd ask you about what you have. I'd ask you what you owe. And then I would say, okay, now tell me how you live. Do you spend money on Starbucks? Do you take vacations? Do you have a first home, a second home? Do you have debt up to your elbows? Do you use credit cards? What do you spend on cell phone? Nitty-gritty stuff. I'd be asking you that stuff. You would go, why does she need this? But that's my education to understand what does your future look like. Because if you ask me to help you get ready for retirement, I'm going to ask you those questions because in retirement, that's going to help me determine how you're going to live. So if you spend X amount of money on Starbucks, there's no reasonable expectation on my part that you won't continue to do that when you retire. If you're a person who spends a lot on clothes, I would hope if you're not working anymore, you wouldn't do that anymore. But if you love to golf, you're not going to stop golfing when you retire. If you love to travel, you're probably going to do more of that. Okay? If you spend X amount of time caring for a child with a disability, that's not going to stop either. So I have to have a reasonable expectation of how you live today. And then I can turn around and extrapolate that information into the future and say, okay, now I know what you spend. Now tell me what's going to be different. Do you see yourself traveling? Do you see yourself just, staying somewhat home and gardening? What do you see for the future? And you could probably tell me that. Now, what you think when you're 20 and what you think when you're 40 and what you think when you're 60 certainly change. So when somebody comes to me and says, our retirement, we think we're going to retire when we're 50, we're going to have a pension, based on our jobs, we are going to travel, we're going to have 2 homes, we're going to have a home in the cold weather and the warm weather, we're going to golf, we're going to do all these things that are expensive, their retirement's going to look a certain way, okay? Now my retirement, I'm on an airplane a lot. I don't need to get on an airplane. I don't need 2 houses. I want a simpler life. I've spent my life doing a lot of things, and I plan to not retire when I'm 50 or 60. I love what I'm doing. I'm going to hope I'm still doing this when I'm 75, okay? I don't need early retirement. I love what I do. And I hope maybe it'll be a simpler do what I do, and maybe I won't be on it as many airplanes because my staff will be doing that. But I see myself still talking and educating families and writing books about it. And maybe I'll be living out of my Wisconsin home, and I'll be gardening. And if I have a garden and I have my Nook and I have my internet so I can do research and travel once a month to make a speech, that's my retirement. Okay? Now, those are 2 very different retirements, but they're visions that we have. So if I asked a 20-year-old what their retirement looks like, they're going to say at age 50. And as they get older, at 40, they're going to realize, well, probably not. I haven't saved enough to retire when I'm 50. And if I asked a 60-year-old, they may say, well, I'm there, I've saved my money, or I haven't, and I'm probably going to work until I'm 80. Okay? As we get older, our vision changes because we have more reality. All right. Why did I tell you that story? It's because we have a really hard time thinking about our children's future. And I have a son with a special need. He's disabled. He's mentally ill. He's blind. He has OCD. He will not provide for his future. Okay? He cannot. And so I need to be thinking about his future. And it starts today. He can't work. He's living in his own apartment, but he has supports. And there is no way that he is going to provide for his future. I'm worried about if I'm not here because I'm on the phone with him a lot. I have to make sure things are okay. Just like you're going to have to do for your daughter, you're going to have to put a plan in place. So you need to be thinking about, well, how does your child live today? What are the things you have to do for them? What's it going to look like in the future? And we're going to be thinking about their quote-unquote retirement, okay? So I wanted you to have that frame of mind because it is so, so hard to think about our child without us. And it's so hard to think about their future. We have to focus on today. My job is to help you think about the future. So when we're creating a vision, we have to be thinking about, where do I think they're going to live now? In the future, do we want a group home? Is it a group setting? Is it in some kind of other program? Is it staying with you? Is it staying with a family member? Where do we see them living? If you're not around anymore, what do we see happening? What are the medical expenses like? What are the medical needs like? What is happiness? What does recreation look like for them? If they're young, what does education look like? What does special education look like? What kind of education beyond that? And anything else? Do we see them having the capacity to do other things, and what is it? Once I can get my arms wrapped around that, and that is going to change. So it's going to be different if your child is 3, and then when they're 23 it looks different, and when they're 43 it looks different. So the different ages based upon how long we expect them to live and how long we expect ourselves to live all plays into this. And I know it's impossible to predict the future. But all we can do is at any point in our life say, what do we think may happen? And then once we understand those things, then we can say, oh my gosh, where's the money going to come from to make sure this happens? So when we look at that, we're going to build a bridge. We're going to build this pyramid. And the bottom of it's going to be government benefits because we want to make sure that we get everything we can get. And then we're going to say, how much do we have to save? And how much can other people help us? And what kind of insurances do we have to worry about? And what about family? How do we communicate to the family and how they can help us? Will our family member work? And what other resources will we have to come to the table to provide for this? So as we do that, this is a step that is very difficult. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. It's time consuming, but I'm going to tell you it's something. It's the only way I know how to tell you to do it. So the first thing I want you to do is identify, where does your child fall? And if you printed out the worksheet, I'll have all this information. If you haven't, just kind of note it so that when you go back to the worksheet, you can do this work. Where does your child fall in the age right now? Are they 2? Are they 16? Are they 20? Where do they fall? And check the box that pertains to them, okay? And then let's say you checked that they were 16, so you check box number 2. You need to check every box under that. You need to say, okay, they're in school. Then they're going to go into transition. And out of they come in transition, then there's the age of over 23. And then there's that last box, okay? We're all going to have that box probably of a life without you. And it could happen tomorrow, and it could happen in 10 years. So everybody's going to have anywhere. Nobody can just have the bottom box. If you're listening to me, you can't just have the bottom box checked because you're still here, okay? That's the stage when you're gone. So as long as you're still alive and listening, you're not going to have just the bottom box. You're going to have at least 2 boxes checked. And you could have all 5. If your child's 2, you could have all 5 boxes. What does that tell me? It tells me how many of these plans do you have to create? How many of these, because it's going to look different. If your child's very young, your budget for when they're 2 is going to change to when they're in school, and that's a different budget. And then you're going to have another budget for when they're in transition mode. They're coming out of school, and the school's saying, you know what, you need to have a transition plan. And then when they come out of school and out of the transition plan, it looks different. And then when there's another plan, it's life without you. So what are we doing here? We're saying, I have a vision for each of those stages. And for each of them, I have to understand what's the money coming in and what's the money coming out. So I'm talking about they're now 23, and they're out of school, and we're starting to look for programs for them. What's coming in at that time? Probably their SSI, and we'll talk about that in the Medicaid, if anything's coming in from Medicaid. your money, other family money. And so what's coming in and then what's going out? What does it cost them to live? Now, if they're living with you, there's a portion of your expenses that relate to them. So what are their living expenses? What are their medical expenses? What is the cost for their fund? What's the cost for any education? And then anything else. So if I calculate the SSI coming in, let's say on the income side it's $20,000 and the expenses side it's $50,000. 20 minus 50 is 30,000. I'm short 30,000 for the years that they're past 23. Now, what's going to change from when they're alive and well with you and alive and well without you? Okay? So they're living with you, or they're living in a group home, or they're living as an adult, and then all of a sudden you're gone. And that you're gone piece can happen in any of those stages. What's going to change when you're not there? Well, I'm going to bet that you're providing transportation, you're providing oversight, no matter where they live. If they're with you, with someone else, with their sibling, in a group home, they have oversight, and they have you. You're gone in that last stage. What do you have to replace? It's a financial, yes, it's all about care. But how do you replace you? There's a dollar sign that comes with that. So this stage is difficult, but necessary to figure out what's the amount that you're going to have to need, okay? So that's homework. Now, one of the things I want you to do in that whole process is when you're talking about SSI and other Social Security, when I get to that piece where I'm talking about Social Security coming from you, I'm going to give you some homework, okay? All right, so let's talk about government benefits, because most of us don't understand them. Most of us don't understand how complex they can be and what the rules are. So I'm going to make sure that you understand the government benefits in a simple way. And if you have the printouts of the handouts, you'll have a circle like this that's on your worksheet. If not, just draw a circle with 4 boxes in it while I'm talking, and you can be writing in the things I'm talking about, and you can transfer it into the worksheet later. So this circle, I call it the benefit circle. And when I'm talking about the top 2 quadrants, I'm going to be talking about things that we get from the government that we're entitled to. And we're entitled to them because we bought them. And when I talk about the things on the bottom, I'm going to be talking about things that we get because we need them. Not because we paid into them, but because we need them. And when I talk about anything on the left side of the circle, I'm going to be talking about cash, money that we actually get. And on the right side, I'm going to be talking about programs, healthcare, workshop programs, job coaching, and residential. Programs that are funded by the benefits. Not cash that you get, but programs that are funded, which is the most important and biggest chunk. So let's start up here with the rules of these different programs. So I'm going to talk about SSDI, Social Security Disability. That is a program that we all pay into when we work. So ever since I started working, they're taking Social Security out of my check. And when I become disabled or retire, I'm going to get some money. Okay? They've been taking money out of my check. Well, most of us. I mean, some of us may have a job that they don't take Social Security out, and therefore we're funding a pension instead. But in most cases, most of us pay into Social Security. Now, if I become disabled tomorrow, I've paid into this program, this entitlement program, where they require to take money from my check. And so if I become disabled, I have to prove that I am disabled, and I will get a check from the government for Social Security Disability. And the only rule that I have to prove is I have to prove I'm disabled. That's it. I don't have to, they can't ask me about how much money I have in the bank. It's purely, am I disabled? And that rule is called, can I make substantial gainful activity? Do I have a substantial gainful activity and make enough so the government doesn't consider me able to support myself? So what is the amount that they use? It's $1,090 a month. That is in the number today. That if I cannot make $1,090 a month, I will be considered disabled. Now, there's a lot of nuances of that, but I'm going to give you the basics. So I get in an accident, I can't work, I prove to the government that I cannot make $1,090 a month. How do I prove that? I prove it with medical records. And if I get my disability, it's dependent upon how much I paid in. So if you get your Social Security record, you ought to know your own record. So homework for everybody is to go to socialsecurity.gov, enter your Social Security information, and it will come back and give you a report of how much you're going to get when you retire if you're eligible, if you've paid in enough to get your own disability plan. And it also has some other things I'm going to show you how to read. But for this purpose, it's the amount that you would get if you became disabled. Okay? And after you get that, you also become eligible after 2 years for Medicare. So if I became disabled, I would get my disability, I would go on my COBRA from my job, and 2 years later I would get my Medicare. And that Medicare program is the same that people age 65 get. Okay? Those two programs go together. Well, what about our daughters? What about, they haven't worked. Can they get that disability benefit? Okay, so there's another program called SSI, Supplemental Security Income. And it's not an entitlement. We didn't buy it. But we get it because we need it. Different rules, therefore, because remember in the other program, up here, those programs we get because we have a disability and we don't have to be needy. We could have money in the bank. But in this program, it is needs-based. So it's really important to understand the rules. So the first rule is, again, the income rule. We have to be able to prove that a person has a disability and they can't make $1,090 a month. So again, we're going to show medical records, we're going to show IEPs, and we're going to show proof, social worker reports, that the person has a disability. Then the second thing we're going to prove is that they have no money, because there's an asset limitation to get this benefit. So the only thing a person can have and get this is a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, and $2,000. So whose information are they asking about? When your child is under 18, they're asking about your information and your child's. But once your child is 18, they are not going to ask about your information and actually can't, because your child's an adult, and therefore they're only asking about your child's. So for purpose of this webinar, I'm not going to focus on under 18 benefits. I'm going to focus on 18 and older. And because everybody here, assets and income is different, but we're going to focus on what happens because we're thinking about your child's future. How do we get your child to be able to get SSI when they turn 18? So the only income and assets we're going to talk about is your child's. Okay? So if we assume that they can't make $1,090 a month, and we could prove that. Now we have to prove that they don't have assets. Now, they probably don't own a home. They could, and if they didn't have a home, I probably wouldn't put a home in their name, but if they had a home, it wouldn't count against them. A car, but only if they can drive, so in most cases that's not going to apply. A prepaid funeral, they can have a prepaid funeral, which makes sense for a lot of us to have, and there's limitations of how much you can have in a prepaid funeral, and it has to be irrevocable. But the last rule is the most important one, is house, car, prepaid funeral, and the $2,000. So what counts in that $2,000? Everything that they potentially could own with their Social Security number on it. The checking account, savings accounts, savings bonds, cash value of life insurance, mineral rights, oil rigs, custodial accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, you name it. So what gets us in trouble? Most families go, okay, we've heard that $2,000 number before, so we're not opening up accounts. But people sometimes say, I'm just working on a case right now where mom and dad are divorced, mom kind of knew the rules, dad didn't, and dad opened up an investment account in the name of the child thinking I should be saving. So we opened up the account and put $20,000 in it saying, I want this to be invested. That counts against the child. They have a $20,000 mutual fund. They can't get their SSI. Okay? What else? Now, that's pretty clear. No checking accounts, no stocks, bonds. What else causes problems? Savings bonds. Grandma's been giving your child savings bonds since they were born, and now these savings bonds are in your child's name. Pull out those bonds and look at them. If there's two names on them, so-and-so and so-and-so, because you can't really buy a savings bond for a child. It typically has another person's name on it, and if grandma bought it, maybe it has grandma's Social Security number. It might have your Social Security number. If somebody else's name is on there, you can cash them out in the other person's name. But if it's not, it's just your child and their Social Security number, you've got a problem. Now, if it's one $50 bond, you don't have a problem, as long as you don't have other accounts that'll total more than $2,000. But if it's 10 $50 bonds, we've got a problem, right? Because that plus all the other money could add up to $2,000. All right. So what do you do about savings bonds? Don't keep them. You put them in the drawer, you think nobody will know about them, and then all of a sudden you get a letter after your child's been getting their SSI for years, and you get this letter, you have to pay all the SSI back because you have this bond in the drawer. Don't keep them, okay? If you have an SSI, if you have a savings bond, cash them out if you can in the other person's name. And if you can't because it's really in your child's name and they're too much, you're going to have to cash them out and you're going to have to spend it on your child. Spend it on things they need, okay? Because 5 years from the time you're ready to apply, they're going to start looking back 5 years and say, okay, what'd you do with that money? You're going to have to prove what you spent it on. Okay, so savings bonds. What else? Life insurance. If all you have, let's say your agent told you when your child was born, well, let's get your child some life insurance now. They're not going to ask many medical questions because they're a child. If it's term insurance that you have at work on your child, that has no cash value. It's only valuable when your child passes away. So life insurance we have that is term insurance has no value while we're alive. We don't care about that. What we do care about is whole life insurance, variable life insurance, universal life insurance. Your child is insured. You got insurance when they were first born and the agent told you to buy it. So you have this policy, when you buy it, your child can't own it, you own it. But there's small print in the policy that says when your child becomes of age, they become the owner. Uh-oh. If there's cash value in the policy, that's theirs. So what you want to do is you want to go back to the agent and say attach a rider to this policy or attach a form to the policy to make sure that when my child reaches age of majority, they do not become the owner. I, as the parent, stay the owner. Okay? You don't want to have to cash that policy out later when you might really need it. So those, life insurance causes a problem. Savings bonds cause a problem. You want to get those taken care of. If you have big investment accounts in the name of the child, you can't just change the owner. We're going to talk about what you do if you have really big assets. We all wish we were in that situation, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay. So now we want to make sure our child doesn't have any money, and we're going to go when your child's 18. So when can you apply for SSI? Your child turns 18 on April 23rd. Okay. They've been 17 in that month, so you can't apply in April. You cannot apply until May 1st of the May 1st after their birthday, because that's the first month where they're not 17. Because if you apply when your child's 17, guess whose information they can ask about? They can ask about yours. We don't want them asking about what you make. We don't want them asking about what you have. Okay? Because that will put you in applying for a minor. We want to apply as an adult for your child. Now, can you apply for your child? Well, you can, but your child has to give you permission to do so. And you're saying, well, my child can't give me permission to do that. Well, if you are already their guardian, you can. And if you're not, the child can put an X on a box with a witness, and then they're giving you permission. So you can actually become the representative for your child. Or someone else can. We often become representatives for families and do these applications. Okay? So let me tell you about applying for SSI. It's like talking, how many likes to talk to the IRS? Anybody? Nobody likes to talk to the government, because some people in the government are really helpful. Some of them they feel like their job is to stop you from getting this benefit. Okay? So we have to prove your child has a disability, and we have to answer all the questions. So when your child's 18, the month after, we're going to set up an appointment by phone, and we're going to go online and enter what we need to enter. And we're going to tell them all about our child's disability and our doctor's records and hospitalizations, and we're going to tell them all about the assets that your child does or does not have. If a child has more than $2,000, don't apply until you fix it. Then they're going to ask questions about your child's disability, and they're going to ask questions about the money. So they're going to ask all kinds of questions. Just answer them honestly. And then they ask a few more questions. They're going to ask you, where does your child live? Okay, your child's 18. Where are they living? Probably in your home. If you say you're living in their home, then you are providing them in-kind income. So the answer, when they ask you where a child lives, is in a separate household in my home, and they pay me room and board. They live in a separate household in my home, and they pay me room and board. Because then you are saying, I am not giving my child a place to live. And when they get their SSI, they are going to pay me a part of that as room and board for living in my house. Sounds kind of silly, but that's kind of the way it works. If they start asking you questions about how much your mortgage is and all these questions about you, remember, they're not supposed to ask about you. You can come back and say, you know what, that's not really relevant. because this is an adult application, you're only supposed to ask questions about Billy, okay? And so you don't want to call him a child because then they're going to get back into the child application. So you're only answering questions as his representative. They will continue. This is an art, not necessarily a science when you're talking to the Social Security office. So when they start asking you questions about you, you have to have, because some of them will insist to give you, because what happens is you're going to lose 1/3 of the benefit if they determine that you are providing your child support. And so we want to make sure it's really clear that you're not. So if they come back and insist, you have to know how far you're going to argue with them. And sometimes you're going to say, okay, I'm going to take their lesser amount, the less. So how much is SSI? It's $733 a month. If you get less than that, you know that they either your child's making some money and they had to discount it, or that they said that you were helping your child. If they give you less, you can, after that, file for reconsideration with a back date to get it fixed. But just know how to answer the questions, and if you need help with the application, ask. Don't try to do it wrong. Just get some help, okay? Okay, so your child's getting their 733. What do you have to do? Well, over time, you do have to report that. Once a year, once they're getting their benefit, you do have to fill out a report because you're going to be the payee on this. So they get their check. You're going to report how you spent it. The first thing you're going to do, and let's say it takes 3 months to get their benefit, and you said the child's paying you room and board, and you said it's $300 a month. So if it takes 3 months to get the application processed and they get the approval is going to be from the date you processed it. They're going to get their check for 3 months. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your room and board out. You're going to take $900 out of that. This money where they have bank accounts that the money goes into can't build up. You don't want it to get more than $2,000. You're supposed to be using this money for your child's basic support, okay? To pay for their room and board, to pay for their clothes, to pay for their food. That's what this money is for. So you have to know you're going to be reporting it once a year. Keep a nice checkbook. Keep your details. You have to keep receipts, but keep a nice track record of what are you spending this money on because you're the payee. A couple other questions that come up sometimes is, okay, your child's getting their 733 of SSI. Once they start getting their SSI, can you take them as a dependent on your tax return? And the answer is no. If you told Social Security that you're not supporting them, that this money is they're using it to support their own basic support, you can't turn around to the SSI, to the IRS, and say, oh, I am providing half their support. Okay, that's in conflict. Now, if you're going to only take the lesser amount of the SSI and allow that support piece to give you a lesser amount of SSI, you can take them as a dependent. But in the long run, you're better off getting the full amount and not taking them as a dependent in most cases. Okay. Now, your CPA, or whoever helps you with your taxes, may not know this because CPAs aren't always versed in SSI any more than you were until you started doing this. So if your CPA has questions, you can always refer them to our office, and we'll always help them out with understanding that. We have a class for CPAs that we can educate them as to what they need to be doing. Okay? Okay, so your child's getting their 733. Now what? Besides that. So they start getting their money. You're going to start taking the rent portion. You're going to use the rest of that money on your child. The other thing they become eligible for is Medicaid. The minute they get their SSI, and depending on what state you're in, how that Medicaid application process is processed is dependent upon your state. So SSI is federal, Medicaid is state. So typically, most states, when you get SSI, it's one application. You're going to get the Medicaid 2. In other states, it's 2 applications, and once you get the SSI, you have to turn around and send the SSI approval in along with birth certificates and other things to get the Medicaid. What is Medicaid? Well, Medicaid can be health care, but it also is the program that helps pay for a job coach. It pays for residential. It pays for programs that your child needs to get into. So sometimes people say, oh, isn't that Medicaid welfare? We don't want to get that. Well, it's a ticket. I consider Medicaid a ticket. Because when your child comes out of school, and there's many Medicaid waiver programs, you're going to need that ticket to get in. So don't not get it, okay? So what happens to your child's health care? What, this Obamacare, what is this whole thing about Obamacare and Medicaid, and what is it all about? So let's talk about that. So your child's on your health insurance. How long can they stay on your group health insurance at work? per Obamacare, age 26. Now, if your child has a disability, depending upon what state you live on, they may be able to stay on your health insurance as long as you have the health insurance. And so it's really important for you to identify based upon not the state you live in, but the state your company is domiciled in will set the rule. So if you live in Illinois but you work for a company in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin rules are going to apply. If you live in New York but you work for a company in Illinois like Walgreens, Walgreens is an Illinois company, the Illinois rules are going to apply. Okay, so you need to know where your company is domiciled, and that company has to follow the rules of the state. So the state may have regulations and a statute that says if the child has a disability, they can stay on the group health insurance, even past age 26. And each state has different rules upon if the company is self-funding their health insurance. You as an advocate need to understand that. Now, if you don't know it, you can contact us at Protected Tomorrow so we can give you information about your state and how that works. So let's say your child, you work in a state that allows your child to stay on your health insurance, and they're 30 years old. Okay, they're still on your health insurance. How does that all work? So your child will have health insurance and Medicaid. Medicaid will come second. Okay, if you're still you're not retired, you're still working. So health insurance comes first, Medicaid will come second. But you'll need that Medicaid for a lot of other things besides health coverage. So let's say you have Medicaid is only accepted for the doctor take it. So sometimes people say, should I drop my health insurance? Don't do that. Keep your health insurance. And then when you go to the doctor, give them both. The doctor takes Medicaid. They may put the rest of what isn't covered, like the copays, through on Medicaid. If you're going into the drugstore, give them both because you may have a big copay for your drugs, but maybe Medicaid will bring it down. So always get the Medicaid, okay? Okay, so then what happens? So we see these programs, but they change. So let's talk a little bit about what you need to know as you're building out this care plan and what you need to understand. So I'm going to go through a really simple example of how this works. I'm going to use my parents as an example. So you all need to get these statements. You all need to go on to online socialsecurity.gov and pull up your statement. If you're over 60, you're probably getting them in the mail, but most of you probably aren't over 60. And so you want to know what your statement looks like. And they mail them every 5 years. You need to go online and get it now when you're doing this plan. So let's look at what some of the information. This isn't a full statement, but it's some of the things that are on a person's statement. So this was my dad. So it's got some low numbers on it because he would have been over 100 today if he was alive. And it says that his full retirement was 65. Now most of us on this call, your full retirement age might be 66, it might be 67. Okay. You can get Social Security until wait till you're 70 to start it, and that's a whole other science. Maybe some point as people are starting to retire, we can do a webinar about that. But this is assuming whatever your full retirement age, there's a number. And my dad's was $1,000 a month. So he was going to get, at age 65, $1,000 a month. Okay? There's other things on here that's really important to understand. The other thing that's important to understand is a spouse, so my mother, could get her own Social Security or half of my father's, whichever is greater. And that's just a basic rule. You're going to get your own Social Security or half of your spouse's, whichever is greater. Now, if you have worked for a system where you didn't pay into Social Security, you could have some offsets, and you need to understand that. But that gets really complicated, so I'm not going to cover that here. But if you have paid into Social Security, get your own record, see what it looks like, and know what the amount you would get, yours or half of your spouse's. Now, look at the bottom. There's some other numbers there that are really interesting and really important for you to know under survivors. The total family benefits cannot be more than $1,800 on my dad's record. What does that mean? So most I can pay out on my father's Social Security record at the time was $1,800 a month. And the most I could pay to one of his children was $800 a month. What does child mean? Child means a minor child or an adult disabled child who is disabled before the age of 22 and doesn't have their own work record. So let's look at how this all plays out. So this is what happened. I'm going to use current numbers so that it's clear. So when my sister, a PWD, person with a disability, turns 18, my parents were still working, and they went to get my sister her SSI, and let's say she gets the full amount of $733 a month. So now she's getting SSI of $733, and she's getting her Medicaid. When my dad retired, he went into the Social Security office and said, show me the money. Okay, so he retires, he gets his 1,000. Okay, what did my mother get? She got half of his because she didn't work, so she had no Social Security record. So she got 500. So if we go back to that number, the most they can pay is 1,800. So they gave my dad 1,000 and my mother 500. So they're paying 1,500 out. How much is left of the family benefit? Okay, the family benefit remainder was 300. So what happened here is when my dad retired, they gave my sister under SSA, Social Security, $300. But what they do when they do that is they lower the SSI because she's getting that. They lower it to 433. Okay, so she was getting 733, and now she's getting 733. Okay, big deal, right? Well, there is a big deal here because doctors all take Medicaid, don't take all Medicaid. And so what happens is 2 years after my sister became eligible for Social Security, she went into the Medicare world. And doctors like Medicare because it pays more of the benefit than Medicaid does. And Medicaid's late, and they don't like it. A lot of doctors don't take it. All of a sudden, at this point in time, my sister had SSI, she had her Social Security, my dad's Social Security, she had Medicare, and she had Medicaid. Okay, and Medicare costs money, but because she had Medicaid, Medicaid paid her Medicare premium. So I know it's complicated. I just want you to see this enough so that you will understand that when you retire or become disabled or die yourself, your child's benefits will change. And then what happens is when my dad passes away, what happens when my dad passed away, that $1,000 that he was getting went to my mother. Okay, so spouses get a survivor benefit. And so on my dad's record, she was getting the 1,000, but his maximum was the 800. So what happened then is the 800 now goes to my sister. The 800 is more than the 733, so she's not getting any SSI. She keeps her Medicare. Does she get to keep her Medicaid? The answer is yes, as long as she still has a disability and as long as she still meets those asset criteria. Sometimes families say, well, once we go up to the top, you said there's no limit of how much money someone can have. That's true. But Medicaid is still a really important program for our children, and so we want to make sure they keep that. So we still don't want to have anything more in their name besides the house, the car, the prepaid funeral, and the $2,000. Okay? Whew, that was a lot. What do I want you to remember? I want you to know how group insurance works for you. I want you to know your Social Security benefits. And I want you to know that this is always changing. And so on our website, we're always posting the rules. If you sign up for our newsletter, we'll always tell you when things change. Okay? And you're going to need that stuff because you're doing on stage 2, we were talking about all the things you need to do. You need to build those budgets. You're going to know, in the stage of life without you, you're going to be able to go in and say, how much Social Security will my child get when I pass away? Okay? Okay. So, and I started out by saying, when we calculate what your child needed, it was a big number. I will tell you, it'll be a little overwhelming when you calculate what your child needs. So, don't let that throw you. There's always solutions of how you're going to provide for your child. It'll be a big number. But the one thing you need to make sure is you make sure your child doesn't lose their benefits. Okay? So the first thing you do is make sure everything is positioned right so your child gets their benefits. Now we're going to talk about legally what can you do to make sure that you are providing for your child's future without jeopardizing their benefits. Now, there's no reasonable expectation that you should know this. I've been doing this presentation almost 28 years. And when I talk to families today, they don't know it. Some families have heard this before. But a lot of families kind of know a little bit about it, and they don't know the whole thing, and some know a lot. So I'll always go through the whole thing. And most families, when your child's just born, you know nothing. Why would you know this? And you've been fighting schools and working with schools and fighting, all the things you're having to do, be an advocate for your child. This is not something you're focusing on while your child is growing up. You're focusing on making sure you have all the services in place for them. And now I'm going to tell you, you need to do more. Well, there's lots of help out there. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed with this. Just know you've heard it. I think this is being recorded. You can hear it again. We do these presentations all the time, so you can hear it again and again, okay? Learn a little piece at a time. Actually, on our website, we're going to be taking pieces of this and putting little pieces of it on with more, even more detail. So if you say, okay, I don't really get that, I'm trying to do the application, how do I do it? We'll have more of that. Okay, so if you're planning for the future when you're not here, what are you going to do? Because we know in stage 2, we talked about you need more than $2,000. We understand that. Now, let me address something here, because sometimes families say to me, well, if my child's going to be living residentially someplace, aren't they okay? Isn't the government going to take care of them? Well, the government might pay, if you're lucky enough to get a grant or get some funding for housing or a group home. That's great. They're going to have a place to live. The SSI money is going to be going into that, so your child gets to keep $30 or $50 for their costs. Is that enough? Is that going to pay for the new coat they need? Is that going to pay for their boots for the winter? Is that going to pay for they need a special medical thing that's not covered by Medicare? They need dentists that's not covered. They need podiatry that's not covered perhaps. You want them to go on vacation with your other kids. You want to continue when you're gone that your child gets taken to trips with their children or visit or go to the lake house or whatever it is. Your child needs a cell phone. Your child needs some kind of communication device. Whatever it is not funded. They need, I don't know, a new TV for the room. Whatever it is they need, that's not paid for by the government. So when you're going through that budget, and if you go to our website, you'll find some of the tools where you can actually create a cash flow. So what are all those details? We have all the details on the website of what are all the things that you need. Just like when you were doing your retirement plan and I asked you the questions about, you spend money on Starbucks, okay? What do you spend money on for your child? That's the little stuff, but there's no government that's going to pay for that. So when you calculate out what your child needs and you need to leave behind, what do you do? Because they can only have $2,000. So you can't leave money directly to the person with the disabilities. Now, when I started doing this with my parents, what my parents had done, and this is the advice they had gotten from an attorney, was to disinherit my sister and leave her share of the inheritance to me because they understood she couldn't have money, right? Because she would lose her Medicaid. So my parents had done a will, and in the will they said, we're going to split our assets in 6 ways, because there were 6 of us, but give 2/6 to me. And my job was to take my sister's 6th and set it aside and use it for her future. What's wrong with that? Well, I loved her. I ended up being the one who was responsible for her into the future. And so, I had financial expertise. My parents said, okay, she's the one we trust with money. She's the one we trust with Marcia's care. She's been most involved in her life. We're giving it to her. She'll do it. What could happen? It felt right to them. They got the legal advice to do that. What's wrong with that? Well, it's my money. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's my spouse says, hey, we got that money. Let's use some of that and go on a vacation. We'll pay it back later. And it never gets paid back, okay? Or let's say I am married and I put it in joint tenancy thinking if something happens to me and my spouse will take care of my sister. And then one day he comes home and says, sweetie, I got a new babe. I'm getting a divorce. What happens to that money? I always tease and say, okay, if he ever tried to get that money, I wouldn't have to worry about it because I'd probably kill him and he's not going to get his hand on my sister's money. But that's not a reasonable solution either, right? What about being sued? We get sued and we're holding the money. There's lots of things. Or I pass away and I got this money for my sister and I die. Do I count on my children to take care of my sister? So that's not a very viable solution, even though that's what people did. And the attorneys who aren't versed in this may tell you to do that. What about just the support trust? So I have a support trust for my other boys who don't have a disability because I'm leaving things to them. They're not quite mature enough to manage it. So I'm putting it in a support trust, but I'm also saying when they're 30, they'll get a third of it, and 35, they get a third, and when they're 40, they get the rest, okay? We can't do that for a child with special needs because at some point in the future, they would get access to the money. So none of these are solutions of how we can provide for our child's future. But there is something called a third-party special needs trust. You'll hear about it with lots of different names, but it's typically a discretionary special needs trust, a third party. What does third party mean? Third party means other people's money. So we're talking about people who want to provide for your child besides your child. Not money that ever comes into your child's name, not their SSI, not money that they get in any capacity. It's always the money from other people. So let's talk about mom and dad. You need to provide for your child when you pass away, just like my parents did. But instead of giving it to me, they take the inheritance they want to leave from my sister and directly put it into a discretionary special needs trust for her behalf. So this trust is never her money. It's this trust, and it's spent for her care over and above what the government will pay for. So let's say for my son, I created a trust for him, and let's say I want to save money for him. So I can open up an account in the name of this trust. I can put money into it. I can invest it. And it won't count against him because it's not in his name. And the money is for his care. But at his passing, I'm creating the trust. I'm the parent. I'm creating this trust for my son. It's for his future. And when he passes away, I say what's going to happen to it. So I'm setting all the rules. I'm going to say, I'm setting up the rules. I'm going to be the trustee. Who's going to be the trustees after me? When I pass away, who's going to manage it? And who's going to get it when my son passes away? And let me encourage you that, when your child passes away and your daughter passes away, you are going to say who gets it. Please don't forget the organization, the Rett Syndrome organization that has helped you doing things like this to educate you. Leave it to an endowment for them or leave it in some way that they can help other families as well. I always encourage families to do that. So you walk out of the attorney. You need an attorney to create this. You walk out of the attorney's office. What do you got? You have this book, and I call it it's a trust, but I call it the instruction manual. It's the rules of the road for how the money is going to be spent. So who can set up one of these trusts? Parents, siblings, grandparents. Anyone can set one of these up except for your child. Who's in charge of it? You. You set up all the rules. You set up the trust. You name it. You name all the people. I call them money people. They're called trustees. You name who's going to get it at the end. You're in control of this. Okay? Usually you're going to have one trust, one person in that trust. So your daughter is the beneficiary of that. If you have two children with a disability, you'd have two trusts typically. Why? Because typically the future people who are going to do this, let's say you have one trust for two children. How are they going to know? Should I spend it all on one if they need it? Don't put them in that situation. You're typically going to have more than one trust, not always. Talk to the attorney, get some advice. If the trust is for supplemental care only. And two things you should know. It should be irrevocable. What does that mean? Not changeable. The government, if they're going to have a trust, they don't want you to be able to say, I got this trust, but then later on you can change it and make it for somebody else. It needs to be irrevocable. But since it needs to be irrevocable and can't be changed, we got to be careful because what if the laws change? And this is a trust that's not going to just be during our lifetime. It's when we're gone. It's during the entire lifetime of your child that this trust is going to exist. So it needs to be irrevocable, but we want language in it that says it's amendable to stay compliant with the law. Now you'll get that in your trust if you're using an attorney who has significant expertise in this. Okay? We'll talk about attorneys in a minute. When should you set this trust up? You've got to be alive. That's the main rule. You've got to be alive, okay? And so since we don't know what the future holds, you got to do it. It's not, somebody says to me once, well, my child's only 16 and I don't have to worry about it until they're 18, right? Because of benefits? No. Because who knows how long you're going to live? You need to plan now because what if you die when your child's 6? None of us has a magic bullet. We're going to know exactly thing. We don't have a crystal ball. So you need to do your planning now and set that trust up. And it should not be inside of your will. Okay? So if I have a will, and my will says when I pass away, create the trust, create it and put money in it, it doesn't exist until I die. And since I want to control it, and I want to make sure that it follows the current rules, I want to make sure that it follows the rules of today. I don't know when I die. If I don't die for 30 years and that trust doesn't exist, what if they say no more special needs trust then? You don't have it? and you wouldn't have it at that point. So you want to have it not inside your will or inside your trust. You don't want a testamentary special needs trust. You want a trust that when you walk out of the attorney's office, you have it in your hand. It says your child's special needs trust on the top. We want it for two reasons. One, we want it to use the grandfathered under the rules of today. The rules are really good. Take advantage of it. You want to know that it's done, right? Okay. Secondly, I call it piggybacking. We want other people to piggyback on it. So we want to be able to have grandma and grandpa fund it. Grandma and grandpa want to leave something for your child? They can leave it to this trust you set up. If it's inside your will, it doesn't exist, right? But if you walk out with the book, it exists, and grandma and grandpa can refer to it. Okay, so you come out of the attorney's office. What are you going to do? How do you get money in it? Okay, all you have is a trust. It's like a little company. You got it. It exists. How do you get money into it? Well, number one, your will can put money into it. So your will says, when I die, put money in it. Okay? You can have life insurance. Your life insurance at work. You can have a separate policy. So that's something a lot of families do. They go, okay, I did the plan, and my child's going to need a lot more than I have. How can you put money into it when you die? You have a life insurance policy, typically one policy on 2 lives. It's cheaper, so doesn't get funded till mom and dad are both gone. And when you both are gone, while you're alive, you're going to take care of your daughter. But when you both are gone, this money from the life insurance will go into the special needs trust. Who should the beneficiary of the life insurance be? The special needs trust. Your retirement accounts. So you have a retirement account. Beneficiary should always be your husband or wife. But at the end of husband and wife, you could have that beneficiary be whatever's left goes to the special needs trust or a piece of it. Okay? You're never going to leave money directly to your child. You're always going to refer to the trust. What if you want to open an account in the name of your child? You can do it. You can create an account in the name of the trust and save for your child. Now, so I want you to remember, you walk out of the attorney's office, the one thing I want you to know, you're not done. Okay? You have life insurance on the job. Okay? When you got that job, you got some life insurance, one-time salary. They said, here's a form, fill it out. You fill it out, you check the box, it says spouse, and then after spouse, it says children. Can't do that anymore. You can never refer to your daughter. You have to refer to your daughter's special needs trust. Okay? Everything has to be checked. Who are the beneficiaries on your life insurance? Check those savings bonds. Check your profit sharing accounts. Check all the beneficiaries on everything when you come out of the attorney's office. Okay. I'm giving you a lot of stuff, I know, but you can re-listen to this because it's going to be recorded, okay? What about you're sitting here listening to this and you go, oh, my parent already left a trust for my child and there's money. Or your child got an inheritance and you got this account. What are you going to do? Your child's not going to get benefits with that money. What are you going to do? So I'm going to briefly talk about this other trust. It's called a payback trust. It's called an OBRA trust. It's also a kind of special needs trust, but this is the one that holds the money that was your child's. I call it the oops trust. Oops, we made a mistake. We opened up an account and just working with a family now. They have an account with $20,000 in their child. They're not going to get benefits. So we're able to open up a payback trust. Now the difference between this trust and the other trust is first, there's a payback on that. So remember we talked about you can create this trust. It's for your child, and when your child passes away, you can say who gets it. This is a payback trust. When your child passes away, the state gets paid back for Medicaid spent, and then it will go to the heirs. Now, why would you do that? Why would you ever want this kind of trust? Well, if you got money and your child's not going to get their benefits and they're not going to get in programs, you can take that money, put it into this payback trust. Your child gets benefits the rest of their life, and then when they pass away, the government gets reimbursed if there's anything left in this trust. So when do we use these sometimes? Sometimes we use them when the child gets grandma didn't listen and grandma leaves your child an inheritance. All kinds of things can happen where your child will get some money. You already got an account set up wrong. Now, there's some rules around this trust that are very specific. So when you talk to the attorney, only a grandparent, parent, grandparent, guardian, or the court can set this up. A sibling can't set it up. So there's limitations of who can set it up. It needs pre-approval when it's set up. There's lots of things that have to get done if the money is there and your child's 18. What else can go into this trust? Let's talk about child support. The rate of divorce in the world of special needs is pretty high. And so let's say mom and dad are divorced and the child's living with mom and dad's paying child support. Child support can be ordered for the lifetime of the child. Child support goes to mom. When child turns 18, whose money is that child support? It really belongs to the child. And so your daughter's now getting the child support. Mom's managing it. But that child support can cut off benefits for your child or give them reduced benefits. So if that's the case, what we need to do is we need one of these payback trusts set up, and the child support can then be ordered by court order into the payback trust. Mom could be the trustee, okay? Mom's then controlling this money, but the child support's going in and then it's coming out for payment of bills. So just remember, child support needs some special attention. So two kinds of trust. The trust on the left is what everybody needs. The trust on the right is for people who have divorce situations, as well as, we had someone who, child with disability, got a lotto ticket and got some money. Okay, now they got money, we got a problem. So two kinds of trust. Everybody needs the one on the left. The one on the right is a special kind of trust. Other things that sometimes have to get paid into the trust. Pensions. Now, if you're a teacher in certain states, you get a pension, right? And then that pension gets payable at the death. Pensions usually, if you pass away, there's a beneficiary sometimes of the spouse. Some pensions will also pay a person with a disability, a child with a disability. But if the pension pays it directly to the child, oops, we got a problem. So we have to check the pension to see if it will allow the money to be paid to the special needs trust, because that's where it needs to get paid. But the trust has it's a less trust on the left, but it has to have special language to accept the pension. Okay, so work with attorneys who know what they're doing in that arena. So a couple things. Remember, when people are giving gifts, no gift accounts, no college bonds, no guardianship accounts. And if there's life insurance involved, I'm just going to mention this, so if you're going to do a large life insurance policy, you have to really be careful. If the attorney is setting up life insurance trusts, your child cannot be have benefits in there to draw withdrawals. And just if you have a life insurance trust, talk to us about how that needs to get done, because that needs some special attention as well. Okay, let's talk about attorneys for a minute, because you need an attorney to do this. We have attorneys listed on our website. Under protectedtomorrows.com, on the right-hand top, there's a directory. You can click directory, go to attorneys under legal. What kind of attorney do you need? So there's three kinds of attorneys. Attorneys who know this inside and out. That's what they do. Sometimes that's all they do. Many of them have children with disabilities. That's why they do it. There's attorneys who never touch it. They know they don't know it. It's very complicated. They don't want to do it, and they know the attorneys who do it, and they're going to refer you to that attorney. Then there's the attorneys in the middle who dabble. Be very, very careful. When the attorney says, "I've not done it, but I will," be careful. I'm just working with a case right now where the child had some money, and the Social Security office told them, go get a special needs trust. They just used that phrase. They went to the attorney. It was an attorney offered to them by their company because they had high legal service offered to them. And they used, the attorney created a third-party special needs trust for this money. Now, you're smarter now. Is that where the child's money goes, into the third party? No, they needed one of those payback trusts. And so the attorney set up the trust. It's in the wrong trust. They went back to Social Security and said, we did what you said? No, they didn't. They needed the first-party trust. So be careful when you're talking to attorneys and finding out if they really have expertise. If you have an attorney you're working with and you're not sure, give us a call. We'll talk to the attorney for you. We just want to make sure you have the right advice. Okay, that was the easy stuff. What are we going to talk about now? Some more legal stuff. So in your will, you have to say, for your minor children and a child with a disability, who's going to step into your shoes when you die? Who's going to handle the medical issues, the benefits? Who's going to talk to the school if your child's young? Who's going to talk about day programs and housing? And who's going to be the one who makes the care decisions? I call them future care people. They're called future guardians. Who's going to do that? Can they really understand what you're asking? Should you ask them, or are you just going to put them in your will? So if something happens to you, this person is going to step into your shoes and become the quasi-parent. Who is that? Is it your brother, your sister, friends? Who's going to do that job for you? Should you make it your brother and his wife, your sister-in-law? What if they get divorced? Should it be the same people as the money people you named in the trust when you pass away? All considerations you need to be thinking about. Get some help on that thought process. The other legal thing you need to be thinking about when your child turns 18, you're still their parent. You're not their guardian. You're not their guardian anymore. And most families don't realize that when your child turns 18, you can't talk to the school, you can't talk to their employer, you really can't talk to their doctor. Now, some states have statutes that say there's a pecking order for medical decisions only, that they can talk to other people in the family. But your child really has all the rights at that point. Okay? So what can you do? When you're talking to the attorney, ask them about a couple of things. They need to understand your child's capabilities. So one, you can't do nothing. You can do absolutely nothing and decide my child's high enough functioning that they don't need a guardian. Most of the audience on this webinar probably is not the situation. And so the next thing is, does your child have enough capacity to sign a power of attorney saying they're giving you rights to make medical decisions and money decisions? In most cases, we're actually going into court and becoming our child's guardian. Not always, but in many cases, we're going into court when our child turns 18, and we are going to say to the court, my child needs me to make those decisions for them. So it's a court proceeding, okay? You're going to have medical reports. You're going to have to go to court. You're going to have to explain why your child needs it. Because the court doesn't do this lightly. The judge doesn't decide. Because what you're doing is you are then working for the court. You are saying, court, I'm taking responsibility, and I'm going to report to you once a year the status of this person. Okay? So it's really about independence and how much independence you allow your child to have and how much responsibility do you have. And I understand that every disability is different, but many times many of your girls are going to need guardians into the future. So that's another step you have to take. Okay, so we talked about money, we talked about using the trust, we talked about calculating what your child needs. Now, one of the steps you have to think about, and when the attorney asks you some of these questions, they're not being nosy. They need to understand how much do you have. They want to give you good advice. So the first thing they're going to ask you is, tell me what your assets are, tell me what your bills are, what are you worth, how much life insurance do you have? And then you're going to pair that up with the calculations you did in step 2. So you calculated out how much your child needs now and in the future, and we're going to compare that to what do you have. Okay? So it's comparing what do I have, what do I think I'm going to have in the future for my own care, and what's the likelihood, and how do I split my money between my children? So it's our head versus our heart. Our heart tells us our children should be treated equally, right? And so when I talked to my dad, and they had split the assets 6 ways. And so when we went back to the attorney with my parents, my dad, his heart said, split the money 6 ways. Now, I come from a blue-collar family. My parents had a home, and if they ever had $10,000 in the bank, that was a lot of money to them. Okay? It's just the world we grew up in. And so now they're talking about splitting this, whatever they had left at their death, 6 ways. I said, Dad, let's talk about the head part of it versus the heart part of it. Heart says you want to be equal to us all. However, Marcia's going to need more than all of us. And so when you look at what you've got to decide how do you split that estate. And there's many, many ways to do it. Okay? You could decide I'm going to give 50% to the special needs trust and split the 50% between the other kids. I'm going to give my parents, put everything to my sister's special needs trust. I don't know what the right answer is. Many times it solves the heart problem by saying, I'm going to split up what I have 6 ways. And then I'm going to buy a separate life insurance policy for mom and dad, or just mom, or whoever's healthy, and fund the special needs trust specifically only with that policy. That way, because you don't know how much is going to be left at your death. And so whatever's left, you split between the kids, but you know your daughter special needs trust is funded with the life insurance. So there's no right answer here. You just have to think about, and it's our heart tears, really wants us to do something for all of our kids equally, and so that's always a difficult decision. But the attorney's going to help guide you along. Your financial advisor can help guide you along. The other step, one of the steps, is a constant process. So this feeds into all the other ones. You're going to start saying, where's my child going to live, to learn, to work, and to play? This never ends. Through your lifetime, you're going to constantly be looking at this. This will drive the others. So as you say, okay, where are they living? Where are they going to live later? That is going to continue to feed into step 2. And so this process of building its transition plan continues. I want to go through one more step before we wrap up. And it's really thinking back about what you know and how do you communicate to people. So we have all, let's say we have all the legal stuff done and we figured out the financial stuff and you've done a really good job of all of that. So you got the special needs trust and you got your estate plan done and you've done your own financial planning. You know you're going to be okay. And you've identified who's going to step into your shoes for the money and who's going to step into your shoes for the care. You did all that, right? So I'm going to tell you, I was at a conference speaking and I was talking to parents about this step. And one of the girls in the back of the room started sobbing when I was doing this. She was a young girl. She was maybe 24 years old. And she raised her hand and she said, can I come and talk to the other parents who are in the room? So she came up and she said, I'm not a parent. She said, I'm the sibling. And she said, my parents heard this presentation 3 years ago. And they kind of talked to me about it. And we started chatting, but they never really took this seriously. My parents passed away in a car accident this year, and I am now my brother's guardian. And she said, I don't know what to do. She says, I'm his sister, and I know a lot about him, but my parents didn't do this. And I'm somewhat angry that they didn't, because I am now learning all over, and I knew certain things, but I didn't know so much, and it's so hard. And she was sobbing to me and sobbing to these parents. And the parents were like, I think this group took it pretty seriously as we got into it. So let's think about how much you know in your heads. And parents many, many times to me tell me that they have shared information with their other children and future guardians. But when I go to the other children and future guardians, they don't know. They just don't know. So what are you thinking? If your child's young, what's your house set up like? What are you thinking about the future of the residential program for your child? What do you want? Are they going to live with the other kids? Are they going to be responsible? Somebody was in my office yesterday and they said, well, our plan is that we're going to move near our son who lives on the East Coast. And then when we pass away, we're going to have our child living in our house and he'll move in. And I said, really? Tell me about the other. And he was in an MBA program. I said, you're going to move all the way to New York, and he's going to get a job on the West Coast. Are you going to stop him from his career because you moved there? And we started to talk about all that, and they realized, wow, they had a lot of work to do because the reality of that was not really, could be possible. It might exactly happen the way they had it played out. But in reality, anything could happen to the other kids who we think are going to step up. We ought to really be taking this steps really serious about where they're going to live. If they're young and they're in an education system and they're in special ed, did the other kids, have they ever gone to an IEP meeting? Who are you picking to be future caregivers? And you say, well, they're not going to come into play till my child's older. I don't know. We don't know that. We don't know what's going to happen. Somebody you choose should probably be involved in that education process. If your child can work in some capacity, no matter what it is, if they're in a workshop, whatever they do, someone else needs to understand what that's all about. Medical care. I know a lot of you have struggled through who's the doctor, and what's the right doctor, how do you find the doctor that understands this, what are the meds, how do you do that? You all probably know that you should write down the doctor's names and you should write down the meds, right? How many of you have seen doctors that you wish you'd never seen, or tried meds you wish you'd never tried? That's all important information too, the goods and the bads. I was talking to a healthcare company, insurance company actually, not too long ago, and I said they wanted to know how they could do better for families. And I said, one of the things you could do is don't fight the claims so much because you're spending more on fighting the claims than you are on paying them. And they've come to terms with probably the consultants telling them that's probably true. And secondly is they have lots of information on how families are having success and maybe somehow communicating that to the families who aren't on, who are the doctors who really know what they're doing in certain arenas. But when you're communicating to future people, you need to tell them, don't see this doctor. Don't do this meds. We already did that. And they don't maybe have that history. You may not know, you need to document that carefully. Social life, what is fun about? Okay, other sibs may not know that. It's really important. What about religious activities? If they're involved in any kind of religious activity, communicate that. Final arrangements, if you've made them, where are the documents? Where are the papers? routines. We all know that in the world of disability, routines mean safety. Okay, whatever the routine is. For my sister, she was blind like me. We had to wear glasses, and her eye vision was even worse than mine. Without her glasses, she couldn't function. So she went to bed at night. She would take them off, and she learned how to put them on the dresser right next to her bed. When she was living residentially, somebody, a new care provider, came into the room, saw her glasses, put them in the drawer. Do you know what that did to her for months? She was, A, became fearful that they weren't going to be there in the future. C, B, she was very upset. And C, she called me every day for months, telling me that her glasses got moved. It was a disruption of her routine that was very, very difficult for her. And it was a very simple thing. And I could say, Marcia, that happened months ago. Don't worry about it anymore. She did. It was safety for her that she could see. I know it. If you wear glasses, when you drop them. How do you find them if you drop them? She had that fear. So whatever it is for your child, whatever you have built in to make their life work, you need to document that. If you think that other people know that, it's not the case, no matter how much you talk to the other kids. So you need to write this down. You need to write it down. Now, I'll tell you a little story before we wrap up. I thought I knew a lot. I really did. I was involved in my sister's life. I was chairman of the board where she lived. I was involved in her life. And when she passed away, my mother got depressed and ended up being dementia in the long run. But when my sister passed away, I asked my mother to write things about my sister because I really didn't have my son in my life yet, and I really wanted to be able to explain the difference between being a sibling and a parent, because I wanted to teach parents that they have so much in your head and you worry every day. And the siblings, we often live our life and we have some responsibilities, but we don't carry it around like you do. And the importance of telling us about that and telling us what the care needs are is so, so important. So I wanted my mom to tell me about my sister, and she didn't. And then when she lost capacity, and I started to go through her home, and I went through her dresser drawers because I was cleaning some stuff out in her home, and found a dresser full of letters to me because she had done it. She hadn't told me about it, but she had written my sister's life from the day she was born and her fears about her life and about not knowing what cerebral palsy was all about and not knowing about the special education system. And she also wrote things about how she felt about giving me responsibility at a young age. And there was a program my sister was in where she had to crawl every day. And I had made a commitment as a young child that I would crawl with her every day. And I came home from school one day and I wanted to go out and play with some friends we had a special activity, and my parents told me no, I couldn't do it until I crawled for the hour with my sister. And my mother's letter described that day, and she wrote her just her words were about how she wished she had let me be a child instead of having that responsibility at such a young age. And she talked about other things in those letters about the care of my sister and things they did for her that I didn't know. And when I read them, I was like, how did I not know this? I was so involved. How did I not know this? And if I didn't know it, the people you're picking don't know it. Just don't. But I'll also share with you how my mother ended each letter was that she apologized to me for taking my childhood away and cheating me. So I will tell you, as siblings, we don't feel cheated. I think most of us feel blessed that we are able to step in and take on responsibilities. And maybe when we're 13 and 14, we feel like that. Maybe when we're 20 and 22, we don't. But we do come around and we want some of that responsibility. And most of us are better off for it. But you have to figure out your way to communicate to the other kids. We have a little system on our system that you can use that allows you to communicate it and print a book out. I don't care. Get a binder, use a system, but you do need to communicate it. And when you do that, you need to tell people where the book is or where the system is and make sure they have that information, because this is just as important as the money. If you leave $1 billion behind but you don't explain how to use it, you're not providing the whole, you're not doing the whole picture. Okay? We have a planning system that you can have access to that does a lot of this for you. So if you want to do a care plan and you want to start providing for some of this, you can get a discount. So there's a code there, speech_2015, that anybody on this webinar can use to use our care planning system. I just wanted to give you the courtesy of that discount if you choose to do that. Okay, what I'd like you to do next, because we went through a lot of information, I want to leave some time for questions. We have about 20 minutes yet. But we talked about a lot of things. We talked about creating a care plan. We talked about understanding how much it's going to cost. We talked about making sure that you position your child for benefits and understand the basic stuff that you need to know if you're going to do an application when your child turns 18. Don't put money in their name. We talked about finding the right attorney and getting the planning set up with the attorney for a special needs trust, and naming guardians, and when your child turns 18, going to court to become their guardian, and then educating the future guardians of all the things they're going to do. Okay, picking the people. So you need to pick the caregivers. You need to pick the money people. It's overwhelming. I know a lot of the things I talked about was overwhelming. So the next step for you is think about all the things we talked about here. And I call them a guilt card. It's a little, take out a postcard and write down the things that you are committing to do quickly. Pick out the one most important thing. If it's got the savings bonds out of your child's name, if you have a trust and you're not sure it's right, email it to me. I'll look at it for you. If it's go to an attorney to have them look at it, I'm always happy to look at things and talk to families. If you email me things, I can't promise you'll get it the same day you get it to me, but I'm always happy to help. Whatever you need to do, whatever it is, if it's to start writing a book about your child, you need to start. And don't let it be overwhelming. That's why we call it an 8-step process. Pick one. Pick one thing that you're going to do and start it. So if you would like, fill out a card, write down what you promise, mail it to me, and I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to mail it back to you in 3 months and say, you know what, you need to, you said you're going to do this. So I'm very happy to take cards. You can go on our website and get our address, fill out a little postcard, mail it to me. I will hold it here for 3 months, and we're going to send it back to you and do it as a little reminder. But whatever your first step is, I don't care what it is, just write down right now what you think you need to do immediately. Because I know that if you do one thing, that's our stages are built on, our step 1, step 2. We know that if you do number 1, we're going to get you to number 2. And if you do number 2, we're going to get you to 3. And some people already have trust done, so you won't need 3, but maybe you need it checked. Everybody needs to do creating the book about your child. So whatever it is for you, start it. Okay, if that's what I want to get out of this, is I want everybody to start one step, whatever it is. Okay, so we went through a lot, and I'm going to stop now and see if there's any questions people have. And if not, there's our email address, info@protectedtomorrows.com. That will get to me, the staff member who will get it to me. And also you can get it to Paige and her group, and they'll get it to me as well. Great. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Marianne. Oh my gosh, I have seen this presentation before, and I learn something new every time I watch it. So thank you for being with us again today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, I'm going to make one other comment, too. There's some legislation out there called the ABLE Act, and we always don't have time to cover all of that. But,
oh, good. Thank you. There were some questions about that.
Because somebody, yeah, so I'm going to give you a really brief overview. If we run 5 minutes over, are we okay on this?
We're fine. Yep.
Okay. So the ABLE Act. The ABLE Act is some legislation that was started back in around 2006. It finally passed this year. Yay, yay, yay. Yeah. But yes, it didn't end up the way it started. And so I want to just give you some, we're going to put this into our presentation in the future. It's hard to get all this in. And we're actually going to do, and we're happy to do it for you, a webinar just about how to use the ABLE Act, if you want to schedule one in the future. But the ABLE Act is, it turned out to be legislation that is creating a new 529. So if you know what a 529 is, it's a college savings account, okay? But you can only use that money for college. And so the ABLE Act is creating a 529A. It's a kind of savings plan that we can save for a person with special needs, and it's tax-free savings. So let me tell you the pros and cons and where it's at. So the federal government just last Friday finalize the regulations that apply to it. It's got 30-day comment period. After the 30-day comment period, it'll be done. States, I think about 28 states have passed their legislation. They may have to modify it based upon the final regs. And then once the states have all passed their legislation, they don't all have to don't do it, but most states will probably pass legislation. And then after that, the investment houses will negotiate with them as to the investment programs that will fit within that. So you won't be able to open an account and just invest wildly in it. It'll be just like the 529s where there'll be programs where you invest. Okay, so that's kind of status of the ABLE Act, and we're hoping that they'll be available in 2016. So how does it work? These are the rules. Your child must have been disabled before the age of 26 to be able to use it. Okay, that's rule number one. One account per child or adult. So they could be an adult. I mean, they could be 28 and still open it. They just had to have the disability and be disabled before the age of 26. So most of you were going to qualify. Okay. Then one account. So 529s. It's different than the 529s. If you have a college account, you could have 3 of them. Okay. You can only have one ABLE account, and it must be in the state where the child resides. The owner of the account is the child. 529 accounts, the college accounts, the owner is the person who set it up. There's going to be one account per child. They own it. Okay, so there's complexities, and each state has to address how that's going to be set up because they're, if your child set it up, they're not going to be able to manage. There's going to need to be a custodian on that account. Okay, the amount that could be put into the account per year is limited to $14,000. Only $14,000 can go into the account per year, not $14,001, but $14,000. Okay. The next thing you need to know is it has a maximum amount, just like the 529. Well, the maximum amount over $300,000 can go in. But the problem with these is you have to be very aware that if the account goes over $100,000, their SSI could be suspended, not stopped, but suspended until it goes back below $100,000. So that's a very important trigger to pay attention to. Now, it's going to take a long time to get the $14,000 in, right? Unless the investment world just blossomed really quickly. But if you're putting $14,000 in, you're not in danger for a while. But you do have to know that there's that limit. Okay. The other really important thing to know about this is that there's a payback to the government. So it's like a payback trust. So you put the $14,000 in, and then you put another $14,000 in. Let's say there's $28,000 in it. And then your child passes away. Medicaid is for Medicaid spent. There can be a payback for Medicaid spent, just like on the payback trust to the government. So yes, it's tax-free savings. There is a payback. Okay. Who could put money in this? Anybody can put money in it, including the person with a disability. So if the person with disability is working, and they could put some of their pay into it. Okay. If the person with the disability got an inheritance, we talked about that OOPS account. So if the child gets some money from an inheritance, if it's $10,000, you could take the $10,000 and put it in here, into the ABLE account. If it's $20,000, you couldn't. Okay, you could only put up to $14,000, and you still got the rest. So if somebody inherited $20,000, this is really useful because you could put $14,000 in here, and maybe you could prepay the funeral or buy them things they need and get rid of it, and not have to have the huge expense of a payback account. Okay, payback trust, because that's attorney's fees, and it's it's got a lot of rules around it. So there's a few different things that you can use it for. It's for supplemental care, just like the special needs trust, but it's a little more restrictive. And so we're in the process of trying to identify what the trust look like and what are the things you could not pay for this. The regs just came out. I've got them. I'm reading them. And we'll be able to do really effective webinars once we understand all of this for families. I think you, as a family member, need to be educated on this. This is my fear. You need to be educated so that you know how you can use them. Will every family use it? The disability advocate world thinks yes. Will it replace special needs trust? Absolutely not. Unless you believe that getting $100,000 in there is enough for your child, which it's not going to be. So, will you have both? Maybe yes. If a child has the capacity to use it on their own, people might take the special needs trust money and fund this account on a regular basis so they can control it. I think most of our girls won't use it that way. You will still need a third-party trust set up. So it's really important to go, as we get the final regs on this. I think it's going to be very confusing personally. Who's going to monitor all of this? It's supposed to be the Treasury Department that's going to monitor it. What are you going to have to submit when you do this and spend money out of it? I don't know. The 529s, I'm just starting to see the regular for college funding. Somebody was just in my office this morning and said they got a notice from the IRS that they took money out of their college account, and now they have, and usually when you're filing your tax return, you don't have to submit that stuff, but now the IRS is sending letters to everyone saying, prove to me you spent it for college. So will we have to prove we spent this money appropriately? Probably. So there's some complexities to it, but it's still a really great tool. So for families, I think we have this new tool to use. It'll stop having to do, when you have too much money, you'll be able to fund this. I think grandparents want to do some gifting. It's a great way for grandparents to do some gifting just like they do for the other kids. We just have to be really careful and understand how it works. So once all the regs come out, we'll be doing more education, but I think that gives you a good sense of how it's going to work. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Great, thank you. I know, we're waiting for all of the fallout as how it will be implemented in each state, but thank you so much for sharing information ahead of the wave here. Lots of questions. I'm very eager to understand it as it comes out. And we will invite you back to do a webinar on this, Marianne.
Yeah, and we're going to be developing it in the next month or so. So, because we're going to try to do a couple phases. A lot of people have so many questions about it, so I'm going to do one with the general rules, really explain clearly, and then once we get the final, how is it going to work, we'll have that second one.
Okay, if you'd like, give me the link when you do your general one, and I'll distribute it to our community. Perfect. And we can set up one more tailored for families with Rett syndrome and our unique, situation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we have a lot of questions in the queue, and we've got about 10 minutes. I can go 5 minutes over, so we can do about 15 minutes. Marianne, I know you're really familiar with GoToWebinar. Would you like to click on the questions and scan which ones?
Let's see if I know where to click on the questions. Where would I find those? I don't know where. I've never. Somebody's always read them to me. I see attendees. I see handouts. I see chat. No, we don't have it. No, I don't think we have the questions on here.
You don't have questions. Okay. So I will. Let's just go in order because I think a lot of these we answered in your presentation, but it's important that we address people who came in first. Okay, so we have a parent who asked, they have put their other two children and their daughter with Rett syndrome special needs trust as equal beneficiaries on bank accounts and IRA accounts. Is that correct to do?
Yeah, that's so they're doing it. They're doing beneficiaries on their accounts. And so they're avoiding probate by doing that. And if they're doing it equally, that's just a component of you can do them equally. If your child with special needs, with your daughter with Rett, is going to get, is that's enough, that's fine to do. It's you got to go through those other steps to say how much do we need, but and then determine if you're going to need to do anything more than that.
Okay. We have quite a few attendees who are from around the world. And in particular, we have parents from Canada and New Zealand that have asked if you have, if you're in countries outside of the U.S.
We are not, but I have done a ton of research, not in New Zealand yet. We're working on Australia, actually, but we do. I understand very well Canadian regulations and how that works, and you have a trust very similar to the Special Needs Trust called the Henson Trust. And so, and we are going to be expanding this. So we're taking our website, and in September this year, it's going to be we totally updated it so it can be in all different languages. Somebody can click on their language and they'll be able to see all the information. But we have a portion now that's got the UK information in it for England, but we're going to be expanding and doing it by country. So that's one of our initiatives for the next year or two. Okay.
Great. Okay, and another family asked if you are board certified in both elder care as well as...
Yes, we do. We do elder care. We don't do, we work with attorneys when a Medicaid application itself is done, but we can help the family do planning on the elder care side.
Okay.
I just got through talking to someone actually who's going to help families think through and be a a support base for the children, because there's so many risk issues having to do around how do you even help your parents and how do you talk about a lot of those things. So, yeah. So we do all disabilities, including elder care.
Great. Great, thank you. Okay, and also families are asking if you're familiar with, if you've worked with many families in the military, because when they move from state to state, you know,
yes, absolutely, because there's a whole component of military benefits and how they all play into this. So yes, we do that as well.
Okay, great. Just wanted to get that. I think these are generally good questions for everyone who's listening to the.
Yep.
Okay. Another question is, so this is very specific, can any money left over from monthly expenses from SSDI be put into the Special Needs Trust? This family lives in Oklahoma and they receive Medicare, Medicaid, and she's in the Waiver Community Supported Living Program.
So it's SSDI money that the person is getting, and it's their money. And so if it's their money, it would have to go into the payback trust. Okay? So if I'm getting disability, could I take my extra money? It would have to go into a payback trust. It could go into an ABLE. If it wasn't a lot, you could start. That's an ABLE Act opportunity too.
Good point.
Okay.
Another question. Our daughter is 2 and hasn't had any big medical procedures besides a G2 placement. They have insurance through the husband's employer, but aren't eligible for government benefits. Any tips for estimating future medical expenses?
Oh, I mean, I think that's something on the medical expense future. I think that's something the Rett syndrome organization probably has. You probably have information on that for them.
Yeah.
So we can give some rules of thumb, but I think each disability needs to go into their support group, and that's probably what you guys do really well, is to help them with that.
We do.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
So, so if some family came to us, we would call you and say, help us understand what the future cost might be for medical care.
Right.
Okay.
We can do that. And we had a comment from one of our wonderful physicians, longtime physicians, who's listening in on this webinar, and she recommended that everybody not forget to write that care plan of what you want to have happen, especially for our women with Rett syndrome. Don't forget to leave out that you want a continuation of therapies, because oftentimes you're thinking about housing, but you're not thinking about continuation of the therapeutic environment. You're securing medical care and housing by